What up, everybody? Welcome to the IAG Thursday Thing, this thing that we do every Thursday where we all try to hang out, learn something, talk to cool people, and just generally have a great time. So, a few weeks ago, we had he's not going to say it, but I'll say it. We basically had a legend of the community on, and we talked about all sorts of stuff. His history, stuff he's working on, what he's doing in the future, but the reality of it is we kind of only scratched the surface and couldn't quite get everything in that we wanted to talk about. We even missed some pretty major points that we wanted to talk about and we just totally didn't get to. It was so good that I think we talked for an extra 45 minutes after the show stopped recording. So we're like, all right, we got to do this again. So he's like, all right, we'll figure this out. We hunted down some time and we decided right after Super Lap Battle, when he's done with that, there will be a bunch of more stuff to talk about. Plus we can hit on some of the topics we wanted to talk about before. And we got him back. So we got Mr. Mike McGinnis back. I wish I had an applause track, but I am super stoked to have you back, bud. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Dewey. Great to be here.
You just got back from COTA, so down in Texas, Super Lap Battle. Hold on, let me are you still living down in that area, or did you move back up north?
No, I'm still in Austin. So
that was
Search of the Americas
like
is about 35 minutes away, which is
that's
pretty
sick.
Nuts to have an F1 track that close.
Yeah, you can't complain about that. So that's cool. That's right in your. Would you consider that kind of your home track then? Isn't that crazy? You could consider COTA your home track.
Yeah, COTA, and then there's another track called Harrisville Raceway, which is available for me to drive on far more frequently and affordably. And that's my go-to for testing, either for my car or if I'm doing work for Cobb, I go to Harrisville a lot to try things out. So it's really awesome to have both of them here.
Yeah, COTA is not cheap.
Yeah, I make it a lot cheaper by instructing. So the group that I do track days with actually offers free driving for folks that are coaching. And they're the only group that does that at COTA because the cost is so high. And we really appreciate it. They put on great events. Everybody has a great time. So I make sure I get my track time with them.
So you had a weekend, my guy. Some big stuff went down. Some with you in the car and some with you tuning the car. I heard a little rumor that maybe a record was broke. Yeah, I would tell us about what went down. You were with a Life Motorsports GTR, right?
Yeah, so they're a customer of mine. I tune the engine and gearbox on that thing and help the team work on, what we're going to do next. And then during the event, race engineering, which goes from everything from pouring through data to deciding what temperature I want to be at when we send the car out on the track in terms of coolant temp, tire temp, stuff like that. And just try to help them every way I can. So there's driver coaching involved and a little of everything. And normally at most events, if that car is going out, it's my 100% focus. But at this one particular event, I end up feeling a little guilty because it's this one big awesome event in my hometown and I don't want to miss out on it. So I drove one of my Subarus in GLTC as well. So action-packed weekend. Also had a few of my customers out there that were driving some Subarus. And fortunately, everybody had a great time.
Yeah, it looked like the event, it really looked like the conditions were great. So you guys managed to set the overall time attack record for COTA. Do you remember what that exact time was? I'm trying to dig it up right now.
It was 202.3.
That is screaming.
Yeah, really happy with that. And actually, first lap right out of the gate. Cole ran a 202.8. So came out really strong, picked back up right where we left off last year, which is what we were hoping to do. Last year, just unfortunate situation where a car stopped, caused a yellow, and the car in front of us slowed for the yellow, and kind of midway through what would have been a 202 lap, we didn't get to finish it. So got to finish that this year, got that monkey off our back, broke the record, and then second session, I just gave Cole a few notes. He had some of his own from what he noticed in the driving, and same power level, just went out and ran the 202.3. So at that point, it was second session the first day. We have the whole weekend left, and just said, let's hang out for the rest of the day and maybe give it another shot tomorrow, but we're pretty much already where we want to be. So that took the pressure off and allowed everybody to just relax and enjoy the weekend, and that was fantastic.
That's exactly where it's at, man. And it's nice that you can go out there, bang it out, and have a good time. How far do you think you guys are off of the 2-minute mark? Like, obviously 2 seconds, but 2 seconds is a long time. It just is.
It is, absolutely. So the second day, we went out to give it another shot. And the first run, we popped an intercooler coupler off and just came back in and,
is that still using intercooler couplers? Are you guys not on a Vangean style thing? I've never understood that. You put all this time and effort and money into building these things. Evo guys are the freaking worst about this. And, they're running umpteen million pounds of boost through these time attack cars, and they throw heaps of track time away because they keep popping the same intercooler hoses.
Yeah, I think everybody assumes it's million or multi-million-dollar vehicle, but it got built years ago, and it had a few changes along the way. But for the last 3 years, very little really has been done. Some exhaust parts got rerouted to avoid them melting and delaminating the carbon drive shaft. That was an issue they had for a bit, but for the most part, it's an older build, and we're just still finding time, in driving and little bit on my end, just in terms of what I can do with torque control to help the driver out. But it's an older build. Yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff on it that, if redone, could be a great deal better. And I think it's kind of a testament to how great the build was all those years ago. But yeah, I mean, there's a long list of items that we would love to see redone.
It's one of those things, and I see the same stuff in Boogie all the time, or and I'm pretty sure anybody who's built a time attack car has done the same thing. They take a step back, they look at what they built, you know what I mean? Usually after a year, and they're like, well, if I were to do it again, I'd do, and there's just this list of different things that how they would have went about it differently.
Yeah, 100%. And one other thing that happens all the time is, you put something together and then you change it and you redo it and you redo the same thing 4 or 5 times. And now it's just this conglomeration of different iterations kind of kludged together, and track repairs and all this and that. And yeah, 100%. If you could do it all over again, it would look beautiful. It would work better. But obviously, time and money, always a factor.
Always. And especially with anybody who's done anything with time attack knows that there's never enough time. Everything will be last minute, no matter how hard you try or do whatever you can to make it not last minute. It will be.
Yeah, and oftentimes it's the money too, right? You got to save up between events, and next event you go to is often the one that gave you just enough time to save the money to go there. So So then all the work ends up being right before as well. So we did get to go to World Time Attack in Australia, but we certainly had some help to get there. And as far as the rest of the year, we got that record back. That was important to us. Looks like the car's going to go to the Laguna event. Nice. So it'd be really cool to run that car at that track. And then our plan is hopefully over the next winter, then clean up some of the to-do lists that we've known about for a while. And some of that is just kind of reliability maintenance stuff, but there's going to be a few changes in the front end that we think will have a pretty significant performance benefit. And then back to the question for a minute ago, how close we are to 2 minutes. So we had that coupler pop off, went back out second session, and we had a tranny sensor or solenoid issue. We won't know 100% until it comes out, but something that happens with GTR transmissions sometimes. And on that lap, we were on pace for a 201 halfway down the back straight already when that occurred. So if I take segments of the 4 laps that we did, or 2 full laps and 2 partial laps, we've got 2 minutes for sure, but we were actually running a 201 when that happened. So I think it's pretty safe to say that 2 minutes is definitely doable. And if that's doable, then we know that cleaning up the front end of the car a little bit so it doesn't push so badly can certainly put us over the top and go under 2 minutes. So it's there, and I would love to see it someday. I'm hopeful that we'll see it next year.
That would be sick.
Yeah,
we're all going to be watching, so it's going to be awesome. I'd really like to see Life come out to some of the Grid Life events, so elbow them.
Well, I'll give it a shot. If you know any sponsors that want to help get us to more events, we'd all love to go.
Hey, I'm looking the same. I'm doing the exact same thing myself. So if I find a sponsor who is very abundant and they're like, "Hey, you got any other people you think should join in on this?" I'll let you know.
Perfect.
We're all fighting for a very small amount of money right now. The pie is not big when it comes to sponsorship, especially these days. Stuff's been hard. The market changed a lot, and a lot of people are putting a lot of money into development or retooling stuff, or in some unfortunate cases, just giving up altogether. So that's kind of a segue into the next thing we need to talk about. So I misspoke the last time you were here and said that we were trying to get our AOS through CARB approval. We are not. We do produce the one for Cobb, and Cobb has went on to get CARB approval for that. So if you want a CARB approved AOS, you're still in with Cobb. But what we are trying to do is get our TGV housings 50 state approved. And my understanding is that is what you're helping us with, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, that's correct. So you guys had a vehicle that we were hoping could be used for testing, ended up that they needed something a little newer after the EPA switched to some stricter standards. So you guys just recently got that newer car. I believe it's a 19 or 20 model year STI. It's getting all set up, and then it'll head out to the lab. But we've already gone through a significant part of the process, and I'm pretty confident that the product itself isn't going to hurt emissions at all. So I think we just need to kind of run through the rest of the process, and then should be good to go.
Well, that's kind of what I want to talk to you about is the process. It used to be real simple. You would just throw on there for race car only, and then you just sell the damn thing, no matter how god awful it was. It could be, the earth melting, I hate the EPA cam, and you could just, say for race use only, and you would just be able to sell the thing. You can't do that anymore. If it's messing with any emissions emissions-based products, and a TGV, the TGVs are considered, a part of the intake. That's a part of an emissions system. It gets to get B50 state approved. It's not easy to do that stuff anymore. So there's a lot more development that goes into it. So kind of what I wanted to talk to you about is like maybe the process of how this all works, and because there's a lot to this that I don't think people understand. It's not just build it and sell it. There's build it, put it on a car, test the living shit out of it through a whole pile of their stuff. Then we can finally sell it in that testing process. I just kind of want to hear more about like what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to clarify, anybody labeling something for off-road use only never made it legal. The EPA would definitely disagree with that meaning anything. And they've been pretty explicit about that. So, I mean, the Clean Air Act is from the 70s, and ever since then, you haven't been able to legally take emissions devices off or defeat them in some way. So that's the reality of the law. The big shift was they weren't enforcing it, and then suddenly they were enforcing it.
We were hid in some wording, and the entire industry was hid within some wording, in some court case that some representative of the EPA once said, "We're not worried about race cars," and like the whole thing was like everything was hinging on these words, and basically they came out and clarified and said that's not entirely true, and that's whenever the brakes got pumped hard.
Yeah, I think a big part of it was there were some issues with diesel trucks rolling coal.
I was going to say. I mean, you mean diesel guys in Florida rolling on old people?
Yeah, that really opened the EPA's eyes. They were doing roadside testing in Colorado, just sniffing for medium and heavy duty trucks that were passing by, and some dude in a pickup truck rolled coal on them on purpose because their van said EPA on it and they thought it would be funny, and the EPA didn't think it was funny, and that kind of ruined everything for everyone. So don't do that, please. It's those idiots. Yeah, and then there was also a case with a company called Gearbox Z that was selling Nissan parts, and if I remember correctly, they were selling headers. And essentially, what the case was about is they sold X number of headers, and then they were saying they were for race use, but the EPA said, are there however many thousand headers you sell, are there that many Nissan 350Zs that have been fully permanently converted for race use? And of course there aren't. So they got caught in it. And I think that was one of the big turning points in terms of the EPA actually using for off-road use or for race use only stuff as like, these are now our search terms to find companies and go after them because we know that they're screwing us.
If you mark for off-road use only on your part online, there is an extraordinarily good chance they're staring right at you.
Right.
That's like screaming, "I'm not doing anything illegal."
Yeah, you're literally telling them, "I'm saying this because it's not legal to be on the road." So so they're going to go straight for that first. So so writing those words doesn't offer a company any protection, and in fact, it helps the EPA find them. So that's kind of that part. And then as far as the process goes, there are two.
I mean, I'd say a good way to explain this would be let's talk about like our TGVs, and then I want to use that because like we're in the process of it right now. So we go and we develop this product. So we want to make a TGV housing that retains all the factory emission stuff, but still flows extremely well. So we develop this thing, right? Whatever the product may be, you've got a cool intake, you've got a cool downpipe. Like you're some company or some guy that's got some awesome idea to build something, right? So we build this product, and then we want to make it legal. Okay, that's that. So we've already got through. We have made this product, and it's super cool. Now we want to make it EPA, compliant. I guess we'll start right there. Sorry, I just want to where we were on the timeline here.
Yeah, absolutely. So the EPA itself hasn't really nailed down as far as an aftermarket part the full process they'd like to see for compliance for those things. So what they've kind of deferred to is CARB already spent a ton of times and money out in California coming up with all these processes and how they want things tested and how they handle applications. They've got this whole structure for doing so. And the EPA said, well, this seems pretty reasonable. If you pass that, we'll essentially accept it as well. So what a lot of the time ends up happening is not just because a company wants to sell in California, but because they want to sell in all 50 states, they will apply for a CARB EO, hopefully get it, and then they consider that to also be what's called reasonable basis, which are a couple words that come out of EPA documentation in terms of what their requirements are. And reasonable basis, in really short and simple terms, is you've made a demonstration that your product does not reduce the emissions quality of the vehicle, does not reduce the durability of the vehicle in some manner that they feel is trustworthy. And usually that means lab testing at a third-party lab, not, wink, wink, we checked it at our location with our sniffer and it's good. But, some third party that they deem trustworthy, not only in terms of who they are, but in terms of the quality of their equipment, did some testing and showed that it still meets the emission standards for those vehicles. And then the other option is if there are certain products that CARB doesn't actually have a procedure for, and as is typical in certain things with government, if they don't have a full process to do something, and you're looking to get a part passed, they just kind of don't know how to handle it, and until they do, you don't have a path forward. So SEMA Garage stepped in, and as part of what SEMA does to try to help the automotive aftermarket and all their members, they tried to come up with a process that would satisfy that reasonable basis that the EPA is looking for in situations where CARB isn't sure how to handle something. So one of those situations would be a flex fuel kit. So for example, CARB has a process for like a compressed natural gas conversion of a vehicle, but not our typical flex fuel stuff that we're doing. And until they do, they're not going to approve any flex fuel kit, no matter how great it is, no matter how great the emissions are, because they just don't have a process defined to do that yet. But SEMA Garage takes a different approach, and they'll go over engineering data and lab data. And if you can demonstrate that your product doesn't adversely affect emissions, in their mind, that's the most important thing. Are we making emissions worse or not? And if you're not, and you're not causing durability problems or reliability problems with the vehicle, then this is really the spirit of what everybody's trying to do is, not have horribly polluting products.
Sure.
So that's what SEMA Garage offers. And then in terms of the TGV housing specifically, because it's classified at this time by CARB as an emissions device, even though I have lab data and certain feelings that it's not, they feel that that falls under the same category as like a catalytic converter, where it's under emissions warranty. If it breaks and the car's only a few years old, the manufacturer should just be giving you a new one. And why would anybody have to make this thing if they're just going to give you one? Turns out in lab testing, I've seen that you can open the TGV flaps and run a full test, and the emissions don't get worse than having them operate normally, even though normal operation would involve them being closed at light throttles and such. So for that reason, I don't necessarily believe that it's an emissions device. I believe it probably helps combustion efficiency a little, and you're probably getting a small fuel economy benefit potentially. But I've already seen with a stock housing that you can open the flaps up and not cause a problem. So what I'm expecting with the IAG product is to have similar results. Car still runs totally fine.
Yep. So that's actually really interesting you say that the because I think most of the community is in the same mindset as you, that it's really not a an emissions device, but unfortunately that is what it's classified as, so that's why we've got a party that way. That's so what is testing really look like? I mean, are you just sitting there running it idle on a dyno for hours and hours and hours with something plugged into it? Like what does a test look like?
Sure, yeah. So for this type of product, it would be similar to an intake or injectors or something like that. The whole process involves, some paperwork and application. But when it comes time for the actual lab testing, the company performing this third-party testing installs the part themselves so that they have control over the whole process, and they follow your instructions that you provide to make sure that they're going to do things the way a customer would, so that their outcome is similar to what they think a customer's outcome would be. And then they're going to drive the car around for a mileage accumulation period, which is basically just they send someone out on the road and they drive the vehicle around until it sets readiness for all monitors. They make sure it doesn't throw any codes. Usually they're running it on regular local pump fuel at that point. And just make sure nothing odd happens. And then once it sets ready for all monitors, and they've driven it enough, then they're going to bring it back to the lab and pump the pump gas out and put a certification fuel in the car. And the reason they do that is they're going to put the car on a dyno, and they're going to monitor the exhaust stream with extremely accurate sensors. And essentially, what they can do is pick
crazy.
out.
And so they have a special fuel for it. Do they have a special fuel like in different octanes? Or is it just it's just the fuel?
No, there's a few different ones. So
okay.
So there's like a phase 2 fuel, which we end up using a lot. For a lot of the stuff we're doing, it's going to be a 91 octane fuel that's E10. They're not all like that, but the purpose of it is they need a certified fuel so they know exactly the chemical properties of the fuel, because they're going to be detecting everything that comes out of the exhaust. And they want to know, what came out of this car is from this fuel. They're also measuring the ambient air around the car and what's in the room. So they're comparing to that. And then they're measuring the actual, NOx, carbon monoxide, CO2, hydrocarbons, the main gases that they're concerned about for emissions. And actually, one of the coolest things I've gotten to see being at the lab is when you've got a car that's running well and it's warmed up, generally what comes out of the tailpipe is cleaner than what's in the room. And that's just...
Isn't that insane?
It's pretty incredible. Like, there are literally cars driving around that are cleaning the air around them. Now, I'm not going to say that that's what they're doing all the time. If they're cold starting, then for a brief period of time, they're certainly not doing that. But yeah, I mean, modern vehicles have pretty incredible engineering behind them, not only in the emission system, but the efficiency of the motors and just how well they're factory calibrated. And it's pretty amazing. So anyway, the dyno testing portion generally consists of putting the certification fuel in, loading up the charcoal canister. They want to have it full to see how the purge system's working and if there's any issues there. And then they're going to run the car in the dyno through 3 different drive cycles. And they're going to do that back-to-back days, the same 3 tests. And then they're going to put the results together and see how you did. So the drive cycles themselves are a little different. First one, FTP 75, is a cold start, and then some around town driving that gets into some little bit higher speed driving. It's kind of a mixed driving situation. The funny bit about these drive cycles is that one was somebody's commute to work.
Really?
That's how they came up with it.
And they decided that's the average.
They decided this is what we're now going to judge companies for from here forward. So
multi-billion-dollar companies are based on your drive to work.
Exactly. So kind of funny, but that's the reality. And they're doing the best. They thought it was an average drive and had a little bit of everything, and that's what they do. And then there's another test called the US-06, which is more aggressive. There's a bunch of really aggressive, about like 10 to 30 mile an hour accelerations, and then you get going on the highway like 70 miles an hour. And then they'll do, depending on the test, we'll either do like an SCO3 test or another highway test, which is pretty mellow. So usually if you get through that first test, which has the cold start, that's usually the tough part.
Yeah.
And then on that second test, which is like really aggressive accelerations, where you got to have your tip-in enrichment and all that stuff dialed in, and also make sure you're not over-enriching the car when you get it into medium to high loads. If you get through that part, but you're going to cruise through the last one. I've never seen a car pass the first two and fail the third. And then if you pass everything the first day, you do it all over again the second day. They put it all together. And basically you're scored against the emissions category that the vehicle was originally certified in by the OEM. So there's different categories that vehicles try to fit in, whether they're like super low emissions or what have you.
Sure.
All the more modern stuff is going to be held to a Lev 3 standard here in the US. But there's different levels of that. So, your STI isn't quite going to make it into the category that a Prius will. And that's fine.
And what they want to do is, I can understand why if you were to make a modification for a Prius, for some reason, you decide you're going to mod your Prius, they wouldn't want cars that have been sold. So there's a particular percentage of these cars on the road. They don't want them like dropping down into like a pickup truck level. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and depending on the vehicle, some of them like barely made it into their category. For example, on a few projects, we found that this one particular vehicle, we had to go through 4 or 5 of them before we found one that could pass stock. And I guess it turns out that the OEM got that through, but just barely. And that can make it really challenging to get your part through, because if the car by itself can't pass, then you're in trouble. But when it comes to the STI in particular, there's a little bit of room to spare. We don't have issues with stock cars failing. And basically, as long as the product you're testing doesn't make it significantly worse, then you pass. You're good to go.
So my boy Warranty, he's kind of my partner in crime. He was in here last time too. He joined a little bit late, but I love having Warranty in here, and I guarantee he's eating this up. He loves this stuff. So I don't know. You got anything to add on this, buddy?
I do. I've got 4 questions already, so I'll try to make it brief. Maybe I won't go through all of them. So,
all right.
Lab testing with certified fuel. Is the car also tested on pump gas to get an A/B comparison?
It's actually not. Basically, they don't want to do any lab testing on an unknown fuel because they don't know what the expectations are of what should come out the tailpipe. So essentially, they need to control that variable so that they can accurately represent the emissions of the car. Because you might end up with fuel that has a bunch of material in it that could make the car look better or worse, that isn't actually related to how the engine's running.
So is that fuel like a best case scenario or like a worst case scenario, or is that's kind of like where I'm at with that. Then if it's not being compared to like a pump fuel, then we're talking minute differences can make a massive swing here. Like I don't know how much you actually know about the particular fuel you're messing with, but does it function pretty much the same as your typical 91 octane junk you would get out of the ground at, a Sunoco in California?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have had to know a lot about it to do this. So One of the things that is a bit of a challenge for us is, when I'm doing work for Cobb, let's say, and for most companies, they have 93 available in their local area. California does not. So any testing you do for CARB, excuse me, they're going to want you to test on your highest performing calibration. So that's probably going to be for 93 fuel, but they're going to test you on 91 fuel because that's what's available in California.
Yeah.
So that can be a challenge, but the good news is, while their pump fuel is terrible in California, the certification fuel is like a really good 91. So generally speaking,
it's the best case scenario of shit fuel.
Yeah, I mean I won't say it's like 93, but it's really good 91. So generally speaking, we'll go out there, we'll have a 93 tune, and we might see a little bit of knock that we wouldn't see on 93, but it's not going to run significantly different. What I did, one of the things I learned in this process was that they were not putting the cert fuel in right away. In order to try to save you money, they just put pump gas in the car when they're doing mileage accumulation or just checking something out on the car. But then I would get a data log and I would be like, oh my goodness, what is wrong with this car? And, it was just that they put ACN 91, this terrible California fuel in a car on a 93 tune, and that does not go well. So, fortunately, that cert fuel that we're using for most things, the 91 E10, is a really good 91. So we're not having to certify on what someone would get out of the pump in Cali.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what about ethanol then? Like you just talked about flex fuel. Do they have like a certification ethanol then?
They do now. That was Cobb is, they're kind of pioneering a bunch of things right now, and they had to go to a fuel provider who provides the cert gas and say, hey, we need an ethanol blend. Basically, they just need a place who can not only create the fuel in a really controlled and repeatable manner, but can also analyze all the fuel properties and provide all the data and all the coefficients that get loaded into the emission system, so it knows what it's going to be expecting, and it can work it into its model for how it evaluates emissions.
That's actually really cool.
And you know what? And that's one of those things that Cobb is not going to get enough credit for. And they're looked at kind of. The community kind of turned their backs on Cobb a little bit after everything went nuts. Okay, and we a whole different conversation with Greenspeed and everything else. People were pissed, but I don't think people realize the investment Cobb had to make some of this stuff work, especially with new flex fuel. That is a lot of work to get a government agency to hey, we're trying to do ethanol here. That's a lot of groundwork. That's huge.
And then, they also had to completely remake the product in a new way. They used to just use an existing analog input, which they were no longer allowed to do, and had to come up with something really fancy to satisfy the government and get that data to the ECU in another way. So it wasn't just the compliance effort. It was a full redesign from scratch of the entire product. And they've put years and millions of dollars into it, and really my hat's off to them for their dedication. They could have lied down and gone away, and I don't think customers would have been happy with Cobb gone, because they've been a leader in Subaru in the industry for so long. Sure. So I'm really, really excited that they've really stuck with it and pressed on, and at this point, I think basically 100% of what's on the Cobb website has these approvals. They've done it on hundreds of items across hundreds of year models of vehicles. Massive effort by a whole lot of people.
So CARB tests the 93 tune on 91 certified fuel because it's the highest performing tune. Does that apply the same way to something higher than just a stage 1 tune, such as a stage 2 plus flex fuel? Why did they do it that way?
Sure, yeah. So while the EPA has kind of said, you know, CARB's got this all figured out, we're going to let them do their thing and we'll just kind of use that for everywhere. As far as California is concerned, this is just their deal and there is no 93 in California, so why would they test on anything else? In their mind, they're just making sure things being used in California are okay. And if someone wants to use, you know, the EO they get there for other purposes, that's up to them. But they're really only concerned with California. So as much as it, you know, can be a challenge, it kind of makes sense. Like if you can't buy 93 here, why would we let you test on it?
Yeah, the fuel side makes sense, but the tune doesn't match the fuel going in. Now, granted,
Sure.
some idiot somewhere is going to install a 93 tune thinking
I
it's
think that's
better.
the way they see it.
Yeah,
Is
so
some idiot somewhere.
well, it's not only that, it's I think I might have mentioned earlier, they want you to always test on your highest performing tune, whichever one makes the most power. You know, let's say you have a stage 2 tune, but you have 93, 91, and ACN 91 variants of that tune, and they're all super similar, but one of them makes more power than all the others. So they're thinking that most powerful one is most likely going to be the most dirty. So they always want to test worst case scenario. And the plus side of that is it allows them to say, you know, okay, you've got these 3 tunes. This one's the most powerful. If that one passes, then we can probably assume that the ones that are less aggressive are going to be even better. So we will lump them together and allow you to offer all 3. So that's essentially how they make that call. And they also use that criteria often when they're choosing which vehicle that they want to see tested. So let's say you make, you know, an intake and it happens to fit 2 compact cars, a mid-sized car, and a medium-sized SUV. They're going to say, we want you to test on the SUV because it's the heaviest and, you know, probably is going to be under the most strain to complete the same drive cycle. You know, they'll look for those worst case scenarios in every situation. But again, the upside is if they feel that you can pass the worst case, then they feel confident you can pass all the others. And they don't make you test every single possible combination of part and vehicle, which while the process is still very expensive, could be a heck of a lot worse. So we definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, that all makes sense, and I'm glad they do it that way because it's a cost-saving measure, even if it is hard mode. And happy to hear that Cobb made it work. I was just thinking ahead to what if Cobb offered a stage power package with a turbo, and you're really going to expect them to run that on like a like a stock car and then put all the parts on it for a worst case scenario? Maybe I'm thinking too far ahead.
Well, actually, I did get the 20G Turbo Pass, so that does have an EO. And then
Nice.
the next gen stage 2 package, which is, you know, intake, inlet, fuel rails, regulator, 1050X injectors, fuel pump, all that stuff also passed, and then also the flex fuel version of that. So, I mean, we've demonstrated that you can go pretty far and the car was still super clean. So, the car also had we tested front mount. So basically the full catalog, everything you can buy from Cobb for an STI, it's all been EO'd except for the flex fuel kit, which, as I mentioned, Cobb doesn't have a process for yet, but SEMA Garage did. And we demonstrated that the ethanol, when you had ethanol in the car, it was actually cleaner than when it had gas in it. When it had gas in it, it was still meeting the standard, so all good, and we got our SEMA certification for that.
Of all the parts that you just said, well, there was one that was conspicuously absent, which was a catted 3-inch downpipe. What about those?
Yeah, so at this point, CARB doesn't really believe in performance catalysts. To them, it's an emissions control device, and they do give companies the opportunity to offer factory replacement for vehicles that are older and they're outside their emissions warranty. But they treat factory replacement parts completely differently from aftermarket performance parts. So I believe Walker offers some replacement stuff for Subaru, but they are not allowed to make any claims about a performance benefit. They can only say that, you know, this is a replacement part for your downpipe on your Subaru.
Interesting. Got it.
Yeah, so it's another one of those situations where even if we show in the lab that we can make it as clean, they're not ready to accept someone saying this is a performance catalyst that's also clean and durable and reliable. So something Cobb is definitely working very hard at, and hopefully they'll get there.
I'm sure they're not the only ones working on that hard too. They're probably getting pushed from quite a few different angles.
Yeah, I think so. And then also the flex fuel angle is a big one. There are some companies involved in selling ethanol who are interested, you know, in that happening as well. They would love to see more flex fuel kits sold in California because they would love to sell more fuel. So hopefully that helps too.
The fact that Cobb and others are making substantial progress with CARB is just mind-blowing to me. I never thought I'd see that day.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, the folks there are trying to do the right thing. And some of them are car people, some of them aren't. Some are just, some of them were just looking for a job and that's what they fell into. Some of them are passionate about the environment and they want to do the right thing. But at the end of the day, when we've been able to sit face to face with them and have conversations, they're really reasonable. And if we can demonstrate that we're doing something that's not harmful, they're not trying to be a pain in the butt. They just want us to prove it, so that they know that they're doing their job and trying to protect California and their people. So I know it's easy for some folks to hate on it, and but it's not like what they're trying to do is stop our fun. They're just trying to make sure we're doing the right thing.
So one thing you're working on developing right now, actually it is developed. I don't know if you guys went through CARB approval for it yet or not. Is the BRZ tuning option stuff. This is something I wanted to talk about last time. Didn't get a chance, but the new GR86 and new BRZ FA24 tuning options through Cobb using Ecutech. I don't know if a lot of people realize they share the same parent company now. But you've been doing a lot of interesting work, and I even saw a video of you out on track hammering out of corners. There's some cool stuff coming with that, and this was what kind of took us. We hung around after the podcast last time, chatted about this, but this is something I really want to talk about because man, you're doing some cool stuff over there with the new platform, and there's a lot of people I think are going to be really excited. So you want to chat about that at all? Yeah,
absolutely. I think using the Ecutech hardware and software was big test for Cobb. You know, they wanted to see if we could add support for a new vehicle platform without tying up a whole team of people at Cobb and just have me kind of plug away at it, using what Ecutech had come up with. And through the process, ended up finding that I needed a few more things and got things working a little bit better, and that helped us improve the product overall. But what we ultimately offered is something that we tried to have a whole lot of features on, because one of the things I found that the first day or two with the car was this is not like a Gen 1 BRZ where you can get, you know, let's say 7 horsepower out of a stock car pretty easily and reduce that mid-range dip. And, you know, while that doesn't sound like a ton of power, that car doesn't make a ton of power. So 7's a lot. You can feel it right away. You can definitely, you know that you've got a tune. The new car makes way more power than they claim it does. So I forget the exact claimed crank horsepower difference between a Gen 1 and Gen 2, but the difference at the wheels is far greater. The Gen 2 is really impressive. I think Subaru's never made engines that make a ton of power per liter, and suddenly this new motor gets them, like, I don't want to say it to Honda levels, but it's so much closer and really right up there. So the factory tune's fantastic. The engine's fantastic. There just isn't really a lot of meat on the bone there. And so I figured that out pretty quickly, and then really got to work on custom features. So trying to figure out, what can we give customers that would, have value to them and make the car more fun if there isn't a super easy and inexpensive way to make it a lot faster from adding power. And Lance, actually one of the guys at Cobb, chimed in and said, how about traction control? And I was super pumped. I almost felt like I put it in his head because it was something that I wanted to do. And then he said it, and I was like, yes. So
I get to work on this.
Yeah. So, the way Ecutech works, they give you a series of custom maps. I don't remember exactly how many, maybe like 18 or so. And I ended up using almost all of them, and added a bunch of features. And we've got dry weather and wet weather traction control. It's a multi-phase system, and it's so much more fun to drive than the factory setup. The factory setup is basically a safety system, which is traditionally what the OEM wants from it. And if you get into trouble, it's just going to kind of shut the party down, get the car back in order, and then slowly start to give you power back when it feels like you're ready for it. And then I decided to take the opposite approach and take some of what I've learned from the motorsport side of things on standalones and come up with something a little more along those lines. So I'm not letting it close the throttle. I'm not letting it totally take all your power away. And, I don't want to totally stop wheel spin. I want to get the tire at the slip angle where you're going to get max performance instead. Fair warning to anyone who's going to use it, this is not going to keep your car on track. It's going to keep your car going fast. So what I've been suggesting to people is put the car in track mode, which turns off the factory traction control but keeps stability control on and puts it in a more track-oriented setting. And I find the combination of the two together works awesome. If I overdrive the car, I'll get into traction control. But as long as I'm steering and kind of keeping the car in order, the track mode stability control will generally stay out of your way until you really probably need it. So I tried working with that as a combination, and then also did a lot of testing with the factory systems fully turned off just to make sure it works well in both scenarios. And that was a lot of fun.
Mike, that is music to my ears. It works
so
really
cool.
well on track mode. Yes, I totally want to try this.
And where I think people are going to use this, I think it's going to be a massive advantage, is Club TR and Grid Life is super close right now. And you got guys like Jeremy Bailey, who just put a FA24 in his old school BRZ. So I'm sure there's going to be conversations about if we can make this work with an older BRZ, if it's swapped or whatever, or just in general. But two, there's guys with new BRZs and FT86s who are, taking that step to get their car to the correct weight and really go after that class. And they're up against either Honda swapped, GR86s, FT86s, and older BRZs, and or like S2000s that are built that way. It's a lot of Hondas. But one of the things that some of the new Grid Life rules and organizations have brought to the table is what they call podium sprint. And basically you qualify for this end event, and they take the top 5, and the only time that matters for the entire weekend is what you do in those 2 laps, in those final 2 laps, if you make it into podium sprint. So if it rains and you have good traction control against somebody who has none, you have a insane, absolutely insane advantage. And I am so stoked to see somebody use that to their advantage. It's going to be so good. Or if the track is just crap, you know, being able to use that, I bet you there's time there. There's time there probably for a ton of people.
Subaru's to the top, baby. More tech.
That's right.
More
Yeah,
winning.
let's do it. Yeah,
I'm so stoked
I
for that.
actually, I actually labeled the two modes wet or cold, and then dry and warm. So yeah, I mean the wet and cold one will work on a dry day when the tires are cold, when the track's cold, if you're not able to get the tires heated up, and then the dry one really expects you to have the tires warmed up to temp. And like I said, that one's really for maximum performance. It's not going to keep you out of trouble. It's going to keep the car driving forward at the fastest possible acceleration rate. And I integrated it with the launch feature that I spent a bit of time on, and actually worked with EcuTech to add some additional features so that the launch control could work the way I wanted it to. So typically, I don't know if you've ever heard a car on a BRZ on launch control with EcuTech, but you know it's a full fuel cut. You hear the engine, like the hysteresis on the limiting, takes a bit of time and kind of bop, bop, bop. The new setup will pretty much hold an RPM. Makes it very consistent. I know just how much torque we're leaving the line with. I know just how much wheel spin I want. I'm controlling it completely differently on a launch than at higher speeds, but I've got the two systems dovetailing one into the next. So for someone who's autocrossing, I'm expecting massive benefit there. I basically was able to get more acceleration with massively reduced tire wear out of that. So we had a section, I don't know if you guys saw the release video, but where we do a kind of a side-by-side overlay of what it looks like with and without the system on. And one thing you might have noticed is just all sorts of dirty black stripes laid as soon as you turn the system off, but try to get a really good launch. I mean, you pretty much either lay a pile of rubber and go just a hair slower, or you bog the car and go massively slower. So it really helps just give you not only performance, but not beat the tire up and give you a great deal more consistency, you know, more than anything.
I think autocross guys are going to eat that right up.
Yeah, I think
I'm currently
so too.
eating it. I cannot wait.
Yeah. So, and then other than that, again, just like Cobb likes to do, you know, they love to add these custom features that give people more value and also try to bridge the gap, I think, between reflash options and standalone options. So I added some temperature-based safety measures. So progressive rev limiting for water and oil temp independently. There's also a few systems which dynamically alter the tune based on a few other things that I have to keep a little sneaky, but after a whole lot of time on the dyno and track, I basically finally figured out why the car's power goes up and down, or it tends to get cranky and want to knock a lot on the stock tune and some other tunes as well, and integrated compensations for that into the tune so that you're kind of always riding that proper margin of safety to that happening, and you get more consistent power all the time. So while we're not able to claim like a big gain on the dyno, we know you're losing a lot less when you put the car on the track.
So I was going to get to a question that was related to this, which is, in 3 bullet points, how would you sell this tune to somebody who's on the fence and then read, oh, it's only 2 horsepower gain at the peak? I've been asked this question 3 times, and I'm one of the people that really wants it. I'm probably going to buy it, but regular people just think of the horsepower number and don't think of those subtleties.
Yeah, extremely fair question. I would say right off the bat, if what you're going for is a higher dyno number, it's probably not for you. If you're ever going to track the car, I think it's an easy sell because the features make it work so good. I'm pretty confident that you will see an improvement in lap time and consistency of lap time, simply because the consistency of power will be better. And then if you take advantage of the traction control features because you drive really aggressively, I think it'll help you be more consistent at the limit. And I know it'll save you a whole bunch of money in tires. So I think for track folks, easy. For autocross folks, the launch feature alone, I just have to believe that could make or break an entire autocross run. The runs are so short that the launch is so critical. And, not just greasing the surface of the tire on the launch and then having to work with a greasy tire for the next 40 seconds. So for them, I think for me, it's a pretty easy sell. For someone who's just driving the car around on the street, they might like some of the other options. Like we have flat foot shifting, valet mode. We have anti-theft mode.
Auto blip downshift.
I decided not to do the auto blip.
Mike, not even an option. Oh my god!
I'll explain why. So essentially, you have to tune it so it works the way one person drives their car, and they have to do it exactly the same way every time, or it makes it worse than not having it at all. And I just didn't want to add a feature like that. I would get it, so I thought it was cool. Someone else would get in it. I'd sit with them. I would see what they're doing, and I'd be like, yep, this is definitely not going to work for you. And then I'd make it work for them, and then I hated it, and I'm like,
I've got a perfect example of this in my old car, my 13. Graham really likes auto blip. Auto blip has never worked for shit for me. Okay, so we have two maps set up where one has auto blip and one doesn't. They're the same thing, but he'll always change it when he hops into my damn car, and I'll forget it's on. Then I'll go out on track, and all of a sudden the car's doing crazy shit. I'm not gonna lie. Auto blip has almost put me into the wall a couple of times because I'm like, what the hell is going on? I am so used to heel towing that it is so natural for me to do it. Now, I am trying to currently learn auto blip because it's something I want to implement into Boogie on this next iteration. But with that stated, like it's breaking a part of like natural driving for me that's so hard. And like when I would blip or how I would approach going into a corner is different than how it's set up, which I don't know how much of that is Graham, how much of that is just the capabilities of the ECU or whatever, but I just approach stuff differently, and that's been rough. So for some people, auto blip is amazing, and other people, I totally agree. Auto blip might not be the answer for you.
Yeah, that particular system itself is very simple. It's mostly time-based, and so if you downshift slower or quicker than anyone else, there is no way to make it work for different people. The other thing that comes into play is, how aggressively are you braking when you downshift? Is the track wet? Do you need to come off the clutch a little more slowly so you don't pop the rear end loose and spin the car around? Like, there's just so many variables to how you want the car to downshift and the speed you want to downshift with, that you can't account for it with the existing system. And ultimately just felt it was best to not use that. I wouldn't want to add something that, maybe one person likes, but a bunch of people hate, and it kind of takes away from their experience. So that's the route we decided to take for now. It is something that could be implemented in the future, perhaps with some improvements. But for now, decided to skip that one.
Can you change maps on the fly? Like, let's say you're out on track and like it warms up or dries or it starts raining or something. Can you can change your setting?
You can, yeah. And you can actually do a bunch of stuff on the phone app as well. So it comes with a Bluetooth dongle and a phone app, and you can move your launch control up and down either with the cruise stock or with a slider in the phone app, which is pretty fun. And then Flat foot shifting can be turned on or off by doing some map switching. Valet mode can be map switched into, or I set it so that you could force the car into valet mode from the phone app, which uses a passcode to the dongle, and that way, you can put it in valet and know someone can't just hop in, hit the cruise stalk, and get it out. So
Smart.
try to put a lot of thought into this stuff.
I gotta throw this out here then, and I can't believe I'm siding with warranty on this. If you could make a slider that you could change the timing of heel toe, or of auto blip, I'm just saying you could make the option for auto blip so it would work for everybody. They would just have to kind of tune it themselves. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
Gosh,
that particular option isn't available to be phone adjusted.
Man, they need to fix that. Maybe in later iterations.
Yeah. Also, it wouldn't be quite that simple as sliding a thing. Yeah, everybody just operates so differently in terms of the speed at which they're going to move the shift lever.
All you do is hit the page up key for a job, so I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
If there was a logic to know, well, I know for guaranteed you're downshifting from fourth to third, and then you just look at wheel speed and correlate it to gear ratio, that might work. But if the ECU doesn't have it, I suppose that's too complex.
Yeah, I mean, the feature could certainly be made more complex and made to work in more situations, but as it currently sits, that's not one that we can alter. So, the flat foot shift is the way it is. Launch control, like I said, we worked with them to improve some things until I was happy with it. And then all the rest of the custom features just use custom maps, and those I was able to create the way that I wanted.
I wonder if the tune is allowed in stock class autocross. Do you know?
That's a good question. I don't know.
That ain't his problem.
That's true. That's true. But carb legal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. Time to talk about some stuff I want to talk about.
Great.
So, you ran some GLTC over the weekend with Sketchy Uncle, which is your H6 swapped GC8. Let's talk about that real quick. How'd racing go?
Shockingly well.
That's good.
So I don't have a ton of time for the car, never as much as I would like, because I'm busy with work and focusing on customer projects. But we made a couple key changes for this year, and I got every bit of the theoretical improvement I thought I might, and suddenly the car was 5 seconds faster. So it was really just a couple little things. I figured out that the rear shocks were binding under high lateral loads, which is just kind of an issue of the factory geometry of a Subaru and a rear strut car. Trying to kind of bend the strut like a taco, and in a non-inverted situation, there's a long unsupported length, and you can run into a situation where the shock stops traveling. So I found that was happening with the shocks that I had, switched to an inverted damper, which just has a really beefy piston and is supporting the piston and the shaft and everything in a far more secure way, so that can't happen. And so that got me, I believe. What are you running for suspension on that? I'm gonna give out all my secrets. No, it's fine. It's not a secret.
This guy.
So there's a company, tiny company in Montreal, Canada, that I've been getting suspension from for over a decade. Called Scale Suspension. Used to be standard suspension, but their logo was STD, and after I'm sure many people tried to get them to change it, they changed it to Scale. They rebranded, and they make really good quality, affordable stuff. So I don't want to start a war, but as far as the sub $2,000 coilover, I have always felt that they are much better than the other options. And then they came out with this new inverted damper that has a two-way external reservoir. That's about $3,000, and decided to give it a shot.
Nice. Yeah, there's the whole war for that we honestly should say sub 2500 area of coilovers is there's in my opinion there's only two brands, and you're bringing up a third that I really didn't even think about. I didn't know much about the scale stuff, so I'm gonna kind of take a peek at that. But you know, when you get down there, if you know, again, it sounds like scale stuff's working great for you. Fortune, feel, and now it sounds like scale. Past that, if you're running anything else, in my opinion, you're just asking for it. It's probably not functioning the way you think it is. So yeah, so you got yourself an inverted inverted shock, and you were able to finally steer correctly. That helps.
Yeah, so before what would happen would be the shock would stop traveling, and then effectively the tire became your suspension. So the car would just start hopping in the middle of the corner.
What would it do? Bind? Because there was so much like flex or side load to it, it would bind up?
Yeah, the side load would bind it up. There's just too long of an unsupported area past the bearing. And so that just didn't work. And basically the car would just start hopping on the tire. And at first I wasn't confident what was going on. So I'm like, oh, let me try, softer spring rates or disconnect the sway bar. Let's try some stuff. And then I put shock pots in it, and it was very obvious what was wrong. And then just took a while to figure out what shock I was going to try to remedy this, because I've seen the same problem with most other shocks. And when they came out with an inverted damper, I felt inverted damper was going to be a solution. So gave it a shot. And we certainly don't have them dialed in perfectly yet. I'm actually going to go back up in spring rates now that I don't have to worry about that issue, and I'm not trying to Band-Aid it. So that was a big help. And the other big one that I know you want to talk about is I got my BMW Mark 60 ABS working. So this particular car had all the brake lines replaced prior to me purchasing it. It was built for it might be turned into a rally car. I think it was rally crossed. And anyway, had no proportioning valves. The factory stuff was all gone. And I was getting way too much rear brake. And we added, like a bleed style prop valve. I very quickly learned that just is not a solution at all, because it gives you a bit of a bias in the initial instant you hit the brakes, and then basically because it's a bleeder, everything just evens out. And then I also left foot brake, so it doesn't work at all with that. So anyway, I could have done like pedal box, dual masters, balance bar, done everything the right way, sorted it out, but I wanted ABS anyway. And it turns out once you get the Mark 60 system working, because it does electronic brake force distribution, I'm sure I would still benefit from some mechanical biasing, but everything just works. The car suddenly stops really, really well. I don't feel like I'm getting into ABS. I think maybe once or twice the entire weekend I felt the actual little hint of pulsing in the pedal. But for the most part, it's just the brake force distribution doing the work, putting the pressure where you need it, and suddenly the car stops amazingly well. So it was a huge piece of performance I knew I had been missing, and suddenly went from being the worst
this in my
car to being like just outbraking pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
And made a bunch of spots on the track, and was able to hold a lot of cars off just on the brakes.
That's exactly what I wanted to hear. So the big problem a lot of us have had, because it's not just me looking at this, it's a lot of people. The E46 M3 MK60 ABS unit is pretty notorious for people taking it and sticking it in all sorts of things, because it kind of runs, it's got the ability to run basically standalone. it's so there's a lot of kits and stuff out there to where you can buy, basic harnesses and stuff to get this thing running. But the problem we were having is the ABS sensors that it uses. They're a different shape basically than what would fit in ours, and that was something that people were having issues trying to figure out how to make work. So what'd you do to get around that?
Yeah, so that took a lot longer than I thought it would. This was one of the few items on the car where I said, if there's a kit out there, I'm just buying it because I've got too many other projects I'm working on in this thing. If someone says they have a solution, I'll just buy the whole thing and be done with it. And found that guy. He was like, yep, I've done this before. Piece of cake. Definitely works with your 06 STI sensors. And sent me the kit and it didn't work. So...
yeah, this will 100% work. Does not work in any way.
Yep, and it was funny because in the end I found out who the person was that he claimed had already done it, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I haven't even installed the stuff in my car yet." So anyway, and he was thankful that he now knows that it won't work, but we'll figure it out. So anyway, eventually worked with the supplier. He figured out some sensors that he thought could be adapted. It's a Bosch Motorsport sensor, and then a different sensor that's from a factory Nissan, if I remember right. And
so you're not even using the straight from Bosch stuff, the sensors, but so you had to go hunting for some goofy ABS sensors.
Yeah, so at one axle it's a Bosch Motorsport sensor, and at the other axle it's a factory Nissan one. I forget which is which right now, but neither of them fit either. It was just like these ones kind of look like they could be made to fit. And then worked with Dusty at Rally Ready. He put together just fabricated out of aluminum some spacers. Just measured the gap on a standard sensor and tone ring setup. Mirrored that gap. Got these ones in the right spot. Wired it up, and everything worked. So I don't yet have CAN data. I found that the CAN wires and the harness that I bought actually had no data on them. So that's something I'm going to come back to because I want to try to get the data out of there and see what I can learn.
That would be super sick. Yeah, if you could output that and log it, then you'd be able to, hopefully you could get brake pressure and all sorts of stuff. Like that would be massive.
In this particular case,
I want to desperately help you develop this if you can't tell.
Well, I'm into it now. Now that it's working and I love it, I definitely want to keep going. This particular setup actually uses two external sensors that the module takes data from, but that we also have wired so that my Motec dash is recording them. And I can also display them on screen, and I have it calculating my brake bias live so I can kind of see what's going on. And that kind of helps me better understand why the car is doing some of the things it's doing. But that's all on the input side, right? So, what I'd love to see if I can would be individual pressures coming out of the unit, but based on the data I've found so far, I don't think that's actually part of the stream that comes out of it. But I'd like to see wheel speeds, I'd like to see error states, all that sort of thing, and so I'll peck away at that as I have time. But the big thing I can say for now is it's badass. It balanced the car, even though it's not mechanically balanced, which is pretty wild. And car stops better than pretty much anything else out there now, all of a sudden. So very exciting. You
got me so amped up about that because if there is one massive weak point in my car, it's the ABS system. It's just the braking system in general. Our shit. Even with I love my pads. I've got a pretty rowdy brake kit on it, but I'm running a kind of a cobbled together 07 STI unit that I don't think is getting the exact data it needs. So it was already a flawed system to start with, and it's in a situation it wasn't designed for, and I am in desperate need of an upgrade, and brake bias is a massive part of it. And I basically only use my front brakes at this point, and you can really tell. It became a massive problem at Laguna. Like, it was absolutely terrifying at Laguna. What would happen is you'd go over the hill coming into the corkscrew, so you were going at the top of the hill. And you'd get into the brakes, and the rear would get light enough to where the rears would just lock up. And but ABS was still functioning correctly because the rest of the wheels were stopping. But one wheel would lock up, and it wouldn't throw in a fault or anything. It was just crazy stuff happening. But yes,
yeah, safe to say you're operating the vehicle outside of the
you think
the realm of what they were expecting at the factory, right? So yeah, I mean, the stock STI stuff from like 06 up actually works pretty good, but there is that point. You get wild with the car.
Well,
it's got tons of grip. You're driving it on track, and it's just
if it's in an STI and it's getting all the inputs it's supposed to be getting. Mine's not an STI. The unit itself is actually sitting behind my passenger seat, and it's only getting like. I think we looped something to make it was looking for some sort of CAN signal. We couldn't give it, so we kind of looped it and faked the funk, and it readied up. But it does weird stuff, like it'll throw a random fault code for a sensor that isn't bad. It's not happy. It's just readied.
Fair enough. Yeah. I think when we have a minute in the next couple weeks, I'll probably pull those adapters out and see if we can turn them into something that we can repeat and get to other people so they can do this too.
If I gotta lean on whoever I gotta lean on here to get them made, we'll do what we gotta do. Like it confidential, we'll keep it to ourselves, and you can go about it however, but let me know, because we have the ability to produce them here if we need to, and I will do whatever it takes to make that happen.
Yeah, no, I'd love to help as many Subaru folks out. I know that this is going to be a big improvement for a whole lot of people, so definitely want to help.
Yeah, let's for sure do that. That's super exciting. I was so stoked to hear that worked out well. Other than that, though, the car performed well. What you got? What, 10th for the weekend?
Actually 5th.
Holy shit, dude!
Yeah. So I went into it hoping I would be consistently finishing in the top 20. I didn't build this car to try to win GLTC. I mean, I look at the guys who are up at the top, and they've chosen a chassis and everything about the build for GLTC, and they've put so much into it, and they're excellent drivers. And to me, it was like, I want to have a car I can go out and lap that doesn't overheat right away. I can do a bunch of laps in it, have fun, test some products, and GLTC is this cool thing I happen to be able to kind of fit my car into and go out and have fun with people. And obviously I'm trying to improve the car as you always do, but I didn't think it would do anywhere near that well. So it's really come a long way. Really excited about the progress we made, and I think we'll keep pecking away at it and see if we can get a little further up. I don't think that chassis is ever going to be a winner in GLTC, but if I can keep it in the top 10... I think now that you got
brakes working... I think now that you got brakes working, and if you manage to get up near the top 5, I'm not saying it's going to be a consistent win a season, but I think in the right conditions, you definitely could pull out a win, especially if it goes to shit, it rains or something like that, especially if it's like real mixed conditions, or it's cold out, or they do a goofy invert and they stick you up near the front and you can hold them off. The fact that you got good working brakes and more traction than anybody, I'm just going to throw this out here. Tomo and I drove Adam Wood's car, which was that's a turbo engine. You're running the H6. We drove Adam Wood's car at Laguna, and both him and I turned some pretty solid laps in that car. I think that chassis got a little more in it than you think it does. I was very surprised because I didn't think that until I drove it.
Yeah, and actually, Adam stuck around after the event, and I adjusted his tune a little bit. It had been tuned by someone else, and he just decided to go with a different combination of power and weight. So we made a little adjustment there that he thinks is going to be a little more beneficial, and I'm excited to see how that works out for him. He decided to go a little more power and a little more weight than what he had been running. And then his car has a ton of work into it. He's already done some of the stuff that I've had on my to-do list and haven't got to yet, like tubbing it. So, he's got his body work done. Car looks amazing. And I think once I tub my car and drop it another 1.5 inches, I think there will be a pretty significant gain there along with suspension tuning. But I don't know. I was thrilled with what I got and kind of.
Are you on a stock knuckle or are you on a drop knuckle yet?
I'm on stock knuckles.
Holy shit!
Yeah,
dude, you've got there's so much left on the table for you still.
Yeah. So there's a couple people working on knuckles. Kind of waiting to see how that goes. But yeah, eventually I'll do knuckles for sure.
That was such a massive difference in my car. Massive difference in my car.
I don't have much caster because it hasn't been tubbed yet, and I can't add caster without hitting everything. There's a bunch of stuff I had done on my Voltron car that just hasn't happened on this one yet. So we know there's a good amount of room left.
That's sick, dude. I'm telling you, like, we're pulling for you, pulling for Adam. I want to go out there and hang with you guys as soon as I'm done doing goofy time attack things. We'll see what the future. I so just want to bang doors with you guys, and it's honestly it's very tempting seeing what you guys are doing with GCs. It really makes me want to try to do it with a GC versus my BRZ, just because I driving Adam's car was enlightening. I have no other way of putting it. It was really good. It was really good. It just did what I wanted it to do because I'm very used to all-wheel drive Subarus, and they drive in their own particular manner. And I can tell I'm used to driving that because Tomo, who is a professional driver, hopped in the car. We turned basically identical lap times, but he was commenting on how I was doing things that he wasn't. But that's natural stuff for me because I drive understeery all-wheel drive Subarus. It's just that was very natural to me, and I think just jumping into that car would be super natural. I could get to racing instead of kind of learning to drive. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think I've overcome some of that with custom differential mapping and suspension setup and diff setup, but yeah, I mean you have to drive a Subaru a certain way. They are a little different. And for me, I think left foot braking was the biggest thing that I, eventually added to my toolbox of driving tools, and that's been massive. Just being able to control the balance of the car to make it turn when I need it to. When it starts pushing and I can tell it no without coming off the throttle. That's been a big benefit. But I think the diff control also. I know that was something. Figured we'd talk about a little bit, but
yeah, I definitely would love to because aren't you working on some shenanigans for diff controlling here? Man, you got some cool stuff happening. Like I like the problem is like I could have a 6-hour conversation with you and we still wouldn't hit it all, but I want to talk about this new you hinted at it and didn't really tell me what was going on, so this is all live to me. Of some new diff control shenanigans. What are you messing around with?
Yeah, so I didn't want to give away too much without talking to the electrical engineer I've been working with on this, but we've chatted and we're good to talk about it now. So it's actually been about 17 years now since the first time I did this, but with a lot of ECUs, you can not only control the engine, you can set up custom tables to control an output. And that output, in most cases, can't drive a diff because it's meant for a boost solenoid or something like that. That's not going to draw a bunch of current. There are exceptions, like, there's some half bridges on like an Mtron or a Motec, but for most stuff, you can't run this through a relay because it pulses at a high frequency and so forth. So there was another company that I had produce essentially an amplifier to allow the ECU to amplify its output and drive the coil and the diff directly a long time ago. But the way it was being put together was kind of hobby level, and they would have some issues sometimes. So I went to an electrical engineer I know has designed some really high quality stuff, and we made the better version of it and integrated some features into it, like the ability to wire in brake switch, e-brake switch, and like an override simply with wiring, so that if you're controlling it with an ECU, you don't have to eat up a ton of ECU physical inputs to get it to do certain things. But essentially, it's going to be something that looks fitting in a race car instead of something that looks fitting like on a bench as a hobby. It's going to have a proper motorsport connector, and it'll allow you to control the diff any which way you want. Set up your own control strategy, and because it's not essentially the brains of the system, there's nothing locked down about it. You set it up however you want, and it also brings the cost down. So the customer for this will essentially be someone who has, whether it's like a Link or, an Autronic, any standalone where you can use a custom table to control an output, but not necessarily drive something that's going to draw like 10 amps directly. And in my particular case, I have it layered with multiple layers, so it incorporates, lateral G, whether I'm on the brake or not, how much I'm on the throttle, and then also a rotary knob, so that I have 9 different levels or maps essentially that I can cycle through while I'm on the track. So it's kind of something that sits apart from the factory setup or what's out there now, where it's not going to be in auto mode. It's not going to be the easy button. You're going to need to be working with a calibrator or calibrate yourself, and have an idea of how you want it to work. I'm certainly going to be open to telling people, hey, these are some factors that you might want to account for in your diff mapping, but basically you'll just set it to do whatever you want, and it'll just do it.
I'm real stoked about that. So I guess my question is the biggest problem, like the ECU outputs, what do you need? Something like an H-bridge kind of concept to make it work?
Yeah, I mean, if you run the diff at 100% duty and you just let it sit there, it'll draw, depending on your system voltage, 8, 10 amps, which is quite a lot. And normally you're not going to leave the car full locked and just walk away and let it sit there. But you do need the circuitry to be able to handle that. Our setup got tested, leave it for 48 hours at full jam and just, see how hot it gets, moderate with temperature probes. So we've done a pretty significant amount of bench R&D as well as, planning and testing and then in-car work to make sure that it's going to be reliable. But yeah, the big thing is the coil for the electromagnet can draw quite a lot of current when the duty cycle gets high. So you need a circuit that can handle the heat and the throughput of that without failing.
So I'm just gonna throw this out there, and this is, I'm just wondering if it could be done. What about something like the TurboSmart black box, where the whole concept of that is to run a electronic wastegate over CAN, so it kind of takes it, so it's got its own like separate power source and everything like that. I mean, Could
Yeah,
you
so
shenanigans
this
that together, or is this going to be? I mean, I guess this is set up specifically for that.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely set this up with differential control in mind. Technically, anything up to 10 amps, you could drive with this thing.
Yeah,
You know, you could use it for a tranny fan PWM control if you wanted to. But I think because of the way we've set it up, it's going to be most useful as a diff controller.
sure.
But yeah, I mean, once you have a thing designed that can PWM and handle a certain amount of output, it can pretty easily be tweaked into something else. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm stoked, man. Like you have stuff that is aimed directly at me as a consumer.
Yeah, I mean,
I
I
hope I
think
can be a part of developing any of this because it sounds awesome, and I just want to go set records and be great. Like, let's take Subarus clear to the moon.
yeah, I mean, it was one of those things back in the day where DCCD was just so interesting to me, and I did enjoy your podcast on that. That you know, I didn't want to just run some controller. I wanted to play with it myself. You know,
Yep.
let me change this. Let me see what it feels like. What does
I
it
mean,
do?
you can do that in some of the newer modern controllers. I have a feeling
Yep.
you're going to be able to do a bit more, but like Map DCCD and DCCD Pro, you can mess with the maps, but they're it's limiting to a point. But yes, that's half the fun is being able to screw with that, especially if we're talking like higher powered cars or different situations. Like if you're in like a low traction situation like rally or something like that, you'd want the diff to be super aggressive, or the other way around, maybe you have ridiculous tires and crazy aero and you want it to stay more open. You can play with that and what it does when you're on the throttle and off the throttle. There's a lot to it.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I've been using the Map DCCD unit on a lot of the rally cars and other cars that I've done the work for. But, I've always wanted to tune it myself. And then the thought was, well, you already spent the money on this ECU and it could do everything except handle the current output. So why would I spend, $400 or something when I already have a device that can do the control? All I really need is to amplify it. So that was generally the idea here. And then, adding the inputs for the brake and the e-brake so that you don't tie up circuits on the ECU. It just kind of all pulled it together into a product that I think will save some folks a few bucks because they've already spent the money on the ECU. They might as well use it for all it's got.
No, if this exists and I can, because one of the things we wanted to implement, it's going to be hard to do this year, but Mtron has some DCCD control built into it. But if we have a unit that's really more, it sounds like it's a little more intelligent, and I'm sure there's a lot that we can't talk about right now, so we could talk about it outside of this. Yeah, I would want to go down that route for sure. we weren't going to try to implement it this year and just run Map DCCD because we got so much on our plate that we're trying to implement this year with new ECU and wiring and cold side, control and all sorts of stuff. It's going to be it's already way too much. But we're in. I guarantee Dylan is out there just going hell yes. And that with the ABS, oh my god, that would change my world. Like I was talking to people, I was telling you earlier about this, that I wanted, my big goal for this year is to be the first street mod car to go under a sub 130 at Gingerman. And that's like, that would get me there. Like just better brakes is what I'd need. And now add DCCD functioning better. The time would be there in just those two pieces. So
yeah, I think for me the adjustability on the fly was the big one. Not only for changing different tracks or track conditions, but now that I'm doing GLTC, while a 6-lap race at COTA doesn't sound long, your tires change a lot over those 6 laps, and the balance of the car shifts, and I can just move the balance with this knob now for DCCD. So
you just open the diff up a little bit, and now the car will rotate a little more. You're not asking so much out of your front tires. Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world, my guy.
Yeah,
that makes all the sense in the world.
Easy.
Yep. just more stupid. What's going to happen is the same thing that's happened with everything else that happens in Subaru and grid life. So be prepared for this. We're a bunch of nerds who figure all this cool shit out with our cars, and then we find that little bit of advantage that gets us caught up. But then they get mad about it because Hondas aren't winning anymore, and they'll find some way to nerf us. It's the same thing they do to the vets and everybody else, and then we try to get around it. But it's happened in Time Attack for years and years and years, and I guarantee it's going to happen. So get ready. You and Adam figure something out that is like the silver bullet. They're gonna do everything they can to nerf that as fast as humanly possible.
Well, at this point, they're not penalizing us at all for all-wheel drive. So I think they're really trying to coax people with all-wheel drive cars to show up and hopefully be competitive. But this is the first time
right now is they
happened.
want a diverse field.
Yeah,
they want a very diverse field, and all-wheel drive is super cool, and Adam loves it. And this is really Adam's baby. Adam loves it. He just wants to see a bunch of different cars out there. What people don't want to see and what he's really worried about is GLT Corvette or GLTS 2000.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what we had some problems with that in the beginning. If it was either, Honda or Corvette. And I think he would love to see a more diverse lead pack. And so, but watch out. One of these days, like, we get a little rain, all-wheel drive starts to show, and then you got the diff working, the ABS working right, and everything's just like right, and you put a good gap on their asses, they're going to come crying.
Well, let's hope we get to that point someday.
Yeah.
The one standing start at Coda, obviously Adam and I crushed it, and they were talking about it on the live stream.
I didn't even get to see that. How did that go?
I mean, I didn't get to see how many people Adam passed, but I passed one row of cars like instantly, and then someone cut me off. I had to swing all the way across the track and still passed like 3 more cars. So I mean, from a standing start, if you're willing to launch the heck out of the car like I am, I have like the built tranny, the IAG drop gears, I have drive shaft shop axles.
I'm
like,
gonna break, and you still make what?
This is my moment.
Horsepower?
Like, I'm gonna send it for sure. So
I was born for this.
Yeah. I think I hadn't finished great in the first race, so I think I was like 11th, and I came out.
I broke a rear axle and was able to maintain my position still.
That's right, yeah. So I think I started 11th and came out of turn 1 in 5th. And so, I don't know how many times that's going to happen before, like, well, maybe all-wheel drive needs a penalty. But I think most likely it'll be one of those events in the rain. Now that I have brakes, I did run the car at Watkins Glen, but I was not prepared for the fog or braking.
Well, I don't think
the car didn't work
was
very
prepared
well.
for how bad that event was. Man, people were getting that was a rough one.
Yeah.
It was miserable. Like, so either way, Jake asked some questions earlier, and I'd be an asshole if we didn't answer them.
Sure.
He was asking about running the EZ36 on track, which we don't really do a whole lot of H6 stuff here, but this is a good question. I love seeing Subarus up at the top. He's wondering about oil pressures, baffling, is there like anything that you need to worry about? Does how far off of stock is your car? What's the situation?
Yeah, so with all of the easy motors, both of the 30s and the 36, they oil starve extremely easily. They'll pretty much completely oil starve at like 0.6 to 0.8 lateral G. It's an extremely severe problem, far, far worse than an EJ. And I think you get away with it in a street car because those engines came in cars that weren't getting pushed. They didn't come in a WRX.
They're on like 500 treadwear tires and they're heavy as shit. Like, if you saw 0.8 G, you were doing something dumb.
Right. Yeah, you had just hit a wall. That was how you got there.
That's how you got point AG.
But yeah, so found that issue the hard way, I guess. Basically, the first track weekend I did, killed an easy 30, and decided that I wasn't going to do that again. So worked with a buddy of mine, and we developed a combination pickup pan and baffle, and we had to get pretty serious to solve this issue. Before I went to those lengths, I did try AccuSump. I tried overfilling.
So basically, all the stuff the current BRZ FRX guys are doing right now.
Yeah, I tried all of it. None of it was enough. The one day I kept adding oil until when I start the car, there was a huge cloud of smoke because it was up to the piston rings. And literally went on track and oil starved it just as easily. And I was like, okay, well now we've really confirmed that this is not going to be solved any other way than keeping oil in the pan. And then we worked towards doing that. So so it's a pan, a pickup, and a baffle. We haven't found a solution that's simpler than what we've got right now. But the good news is that the car now brakes really, really well. I'm seeing pretty significant G's on the brakes, more than I can hit cornering. We're not oil starving the car, cornering or braking. So before I would actually run into situations where if I was just mildly cornering and also on the throttle, I could starve the car. It was pretty shocking how easy it was. So we'll be working on not necessarily refining the performance of that setup, but trying to improve the manufacturability to make the cost lower for people. Because
how much power are you making in that right now?
So it makes 210. At the weight I'm at, I was actually a little underpowered. I think I kind of ran out of time to weigh the car and overestimated the weight savings of taking ballast out because we had also added stuff in, didn't realize how heavy it was, like fire suppression, the ABS stuff, and I just didn't weigh the car and kind of shot myself in the foot there. I could bump the car up a little bit, but it's at 210, and I could probably be running closer to 220. And then it makes it's brief.
What could you get out of it if you wanted to? Like, if you're like, I want to add weight in the car and add power, like, what do you think you could get out of it?
When I initially tuned the stock motor, it made 270. So I know it'll make that.
Okay. So you're detuned quite a ways. So you've got up to, I'm just thinking about how that would fit, especially in Jake's situation when she's talking about a GLTC build. How much power does he have to play with? Detuning isn't that big of a deal. It's just, he's going to have to get the weight down. And I know Jake pretty well, and he's a bigger boy. So, we got to account for that too. So we'll
see. It seems like most of the fast cars are actually kind of heavy. Initially, I thought, these cars probably weigh 2,800 pounds. And then I come to find out a lot of them are like 3,300 pounds.
The vets are for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, Adam's actually, going to add even more weight to go with that extra power. So I think he was around 3,100. He's going to be a little heavier than that. My car was like 2980-ish, and I might actually add a little weight and add some power myself. So I wouldn't worry too much about making it a paperweight vehicle. It's definitely really different than the way we look at time attack cars, trying to make them as light as possible. It seems like that combination of a little more power, a little more weight actually doesn't really hurt these cars that much.
Yeah. And then if you go up in weight, you can add a little tire too, which, and if finding that sweet spot is huge, especially a little more tire may actually last through the race a little better. So again, finding that sweet spot.
Yeah, that's been an interesting one. I was on a 275, went down to a 255 for this event,
Yeah.
and Adam actually went the other direction from a 55 to a 275. So we're both still trying to kind of figure out what works best for us, but we'll see.
I'm super stoked seeing you guys develop through this, and like there has been a part of me seeing you guys do this that went, let's go set a couple records with Boogie, and then just turn into a GLTC car. But I don't know. You guys look like you're having a riot. I just want to party with you. Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest, dude. You got so much cool shit going on. I don't even know what else I want to talk about. I'm happy we got into talking a little H6 stuff though, and what's working and what isn't. I was
fortunately,
really surprised. Are you trying to produce that pan pickup combo setup for those guys?
yeah, we're definitely going to. Like I said, I really just need to work on the manufacturability just a little bit in terms of cost savings. Because the way it is right now would cost more than I would want to charge someone. So I want to try to get the price down. But there are certain aspects of it which are very unique and make it where, unfortunately, without them, it doesn't work. So it is going to be a little more costly than some other options, but when people see it, they're going to understand why.
Yeah. And I mean, the unfortunate reality of it is there is a fraction of the amount of people doing tuned EZ36s versus tuned EJs. So when people start trying to compare pricing on stuff, you know, the volume isn't there to support it a whole lot. So it is going to be a little bit more. There's advantages to an EZ36, especially how you're running it, because other than that car's bone stock, right? I mean, it's not a built engine, is it?
No, 100%. I mean, I've got eBay header, but the intake manifold stock, and we made an air intake out of some 4-inch pipe. That's it.
You can get one of those out of a junkyard for under $1,000. So
these are like 17 and 1900, but yeah, they're not that. The EZ30 would be the one you get around $1,000.
Either way, you're still talking super reasonably priced, and essentially it bolts in. You know, obviously physically it's not too far off. There's some shenanigans you need to play, but physically it's not too far off. So like it's an option for, you know, a sub 300 horsepower track slut, if, you know, and you got to pay a little extra for the pan, but like you start talking about a track usable EJ that you're gonna spend about the same amount of money. So there's advantages either way, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on the track with like stage 2 STIs, and if I run it unrestricted, I just pull away from them.
Sure.
So it's not slow. And I think these engines live to 200,000 miles. These do not have EJ things happening to them. They just work. They don't die. So that was part of what I was looking for. I just want to go out and drive this thing. I don't ever want to worry about the motor. And as soon as I fixed the oiling, that was it. There was like one other thing where we pinned certain tensioner bolts that like to come loose, but I guess apparently besides that and making sure there's no valve cover leaks or, you know, normal maintenance stuff, these engines, they just work. You just run them all day.
Well, might be an option. Hell, it might. Something I've seriously looked into is shoving one into a BRZ, and if you can do 270, especially 270 all-wheel drive, that means I could probably get maybe 280 out of it. That it's an option. How much extra weight does that add to the front of the car?
I mean, I think if we compare it to a turbo setup, by the time you have the turbo and an intercooler and whatnot, I think it's pretty close.
Yeah.
And then if you're running a front mount intercooler, then I would say that the NA motor is lighter.
Yeah. Yeah, I could definitely see that. Especially if we're talking like an eBay header too, because that can't weigh anything.
Yeah.
Did you have to do any goofy chopping with your subframe or anything?
No, not for the motor. We did slightly alter the subframe for sway bar clearance.
Yeah.
I wanted to put a monster in there that I had for my other car.
Okay.
And just the fitment compatibility, we made a little adjustment. But the motor itself bolts in. I used engine mounts that I got like on eBay from a place in Russia that makes them. It was like, I think I ordered them like the day before the war started, not knowing it was about to start, and then was shocked that they actually arrived. But I think there's just this one guy that makes the mounts. But there's really nothing special about them. Anybody can make them.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Well, man, I mean, unless we got anybody in the chat who's got anything else they want to add, we're basically at 2 hours, my guy. We did it again. But this was great, and I want to keep up on this. Okay, I want to keep doing this, and I got a feeling I'm going to have you on at least one more time, maybe two this year. I want to keep up on progress on the GLTC car. It'd be cool if we just could shoot the shit on maybe our experiences at whatever event we were at, because I got a feeling we're going to see each other at a few events at the same time this year. And it'd be cool to chat it up, and I love having you on. I hope you like coming on.
Yeah, man. Love it.
I'm just really stoked that we managed to get to this. Randy's gonna kill me if I don't ask how you like the thumbnail, and if you don't like the thumbnail, he takes no credit for it because he still needs you to tune his car.
No, I loved it. It cracked me up. Thank you.
That was so funny. That thumbnail was great. So, all right, I think we're gonna call it there, man. I desperately want to talk to you outside of this about what we need to do to get the ABS system working inside of Boogie. So you will be getting PMs, and there will be a conversation about that coming very soon. Okay.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, guys, this is a ton of fun. It's always fun when Mike's on. I think we actually managed to hit our topics this week. That's fantastic. Amazing. And I'm not 100% sure. Oh, I think we got Robert Champion on next week. We're going to talk about all sorts of different Subaru events and things. That should be a lot of fun. But yeah, it's been real. It's been fun. It's been real fun. We will catch you guys next time. See ya.